Hey guys, it's Jen, and I am here to answer the 31 Days of Tarot Challenge questions for days 6 and 7. And my cat Jules is here too. And I don't think she's necessarily going to help me very much with answering these questions, but hopefully she can just join me for the ride. So the day 6 question was, what tarot deck did you finally cross off your list in 2016? And that was kind of an interesting question for me, and I was contemplating it because I don't know if there's just one easy answer for that. I feel like there are a lot of decks that got added to my list at various times because I see other people sharing them and they're so visually striking or appealing, or I can tell there's a deep truth contained within them. And yet it doesn't feel like the time to get those decks yet. And some of those decks, for example, the Thoth, I have now acquired. Like I just acquired that in November or December, but I haven't worked with it much yet. So I wanted to, but the deck that was really coming out to me to answer that question with was the Marielle. Because I was aware of this deck. Again, I've only been deeply involved with tarot on kind of an everyday and very conscious basis, really for the last year and a half, maybe. So it's not that this deck was forever on my radar. It might have just been a matter of months, but people were already using it, like for the Tarot Perspective Challenge last year, and I was well aware of it. This was a heavy hitter. And yet, I ended up getting it a bit after that, like a month after that challenge finished, because it just didn't feel like the right time yet to get it. But this deck, I'm sure it's just one of those decks you can deepen into your whole life, right? And really get to know, because it uncovers some core parts of you. So I definitely feel like, unlike some of the other decks that I acquired finally in 2016 that I still haven't worked with that much, like Thoth or Wild Unknown, I've acquired them, but I don't feel like I have a relationship with them yet. But I do feel like I have a relationship with the Marielle, and that's something that will keep evolving and deepening over time. This is the first deck that I decided to trim. And I decided to trim it before I went on the retreat. I'll show you guys some pictures, but you all know the Marielle. And you can see my particular version of trimming, which involves these very thin black borders. But it's really interesting. That's another thing I've been seeing people... that card. Like, how can you not just stop and be with that card? I had been seeing people show their versions of trimmed decks, also for several months, and I felt really kind of nervous about the idea of trimming any of my decks. And before I went on retreat, I knew I was going to be gone for 3 weeks, and I felt like this is the deck I wanted to take with me, but I wanted to be able to handle it more easily because the cards were so large. And I just got possessed on a particular day to just take the scissors to it. And I didn't do a perfect job. I mean, it was my first time trimming, but it really did help me to connect with them that much more and to feel comfortable taking them with me. And it also helped me to become more comfortable with the process of trimming. And it's so appropriate in some ways that this was the first deck that I cut, because it is about cutting to the core, right? Like this deck saying, look, mutilate me. I'm still here and I'm just going to be that much more beautiful. And doesn't that feel appropriate from this deck? I absolutely love it. I'm speaking in a joking way, but we all talk about how deep and cutting to the core this deck is, and I think it's so true. So it did help me to become a little bit more comfortable with the process of trimming decks, and it did help me to connect with it and take it with me. And I've really loved forging a connection with this deck, and I'm going to keep doing that. So for day 7 of the challenge, the question is in a card sum up 2016. So that's also an interesting one, and I was reflecting on what would be an appropriate card. It was it was an intense year, and I know it was an intense year for a lot of people, but it was more like a transmutational kind of year. So I was thinking, would I choose death or temperance, or what do I use? I mean, my mom passed away in November. I went to this retreat, which I keep talking about, for 3 weeks, which was really intense. My first deep Vajrayana Buddhist retreat. And it was hard, but it also brought forth a lot of qualities within me that I felt like were powerful and needed. And then there was also a year of like a lot of connections, but also most importantly connecting with myself. So I was like, how do I sum up all of that? So I decided to draw some cards for it. So I drew 2 cards. So I guess summing it up in 2 cards rather than just one. And one deck that I used is, I don't know if this deck is still available. I got it from one of the people who helped to create it. It's a collaborative deck that was released a few years ago called Awakening to Your Divine Self Oracle cards. And I like using this deck. I find it to be really nurturing and positive and feminine. And the card that I drew for 2016 last year was Believe in Sisterhood, which I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And it is true that over the last several years, I have had a lot of wounding around relationships with certain women in my life, some friendships, and some women that I had developed deep feelings for, or attachment to, and some of that was really hard because those relationships did not always last, and I kind of taken it personally, and it was challenging. And so I felt like last year, it really is true that I was working through a lot of those feelings and learning to believe in sisterhood again. And it wasn't just a feminine thing, it was also a connection and community thing. And some of it was the community of tarot peeps on Instagram and here on YouTube. Even though I feel like I've come in and out of that, it hasn't been a steady thing for me to be involved, but I've been so aware of it this entire year. And some of it was that I started teaching astrology to several people, and that was really cool. I've taught music for, 15 years, almost 15 years now. But like pretty much my whole adult life. But I hadn't, and I've been involved with astrology heavily over the last 7 years, but I had never taught it, except on one occasion. And last year I had 2 students that I also developed personal connections with and friendships with. And so I think, and that kind of filled some yearning within me. So a shout out to Rue and to Amanda, who were the 2 people that I connected with that way. And I also connected with another lady who's very intuitive, who was local, met a few more people, and reconnected with one of the people that I had a deep bond with that had been severed. We reconnected at the end of the year. So there was that, believe in sisterhood, also being involved in my spiritual community and working through what it means to be part of that community and my feelings of sometimes alienation within a community, or even in the band that I perform in. All of these places in which I've felt separate and not part of community, it's been a lot of It's actually making me emotional. I'm so sorry. It's been repairing a lot of that and working through a lot of that, which I think is really necessary for me and healthy. And then also connecting to my brother at the end of the year. So he's obviously not a woman, but I'm his sister. And my brother definitely was a rock in a lot of ways, and just, another perspective and a shoulder and a partner that I still need to take more advantage of to work through the death of my mom in November. So this fall, obviously connecting to him was really profound. So that was the card I drew. Believe in Sisterhood. And then from the Marielle Tarot, I drew another card, Page of Discs. And that also felt appropriate. As I mentioned, I started teaching astrology. I guess I wasn't just starting, but I was in some way starting and doing more teaching at my meditation center. I started on the Vajrayana Buddhist path in depth with the practices that are associated with that. So in many ways it was entering into these profound practices that required me to both own my potential, my capacity to engage and be of service in an earthy type way, but also required me to become innocent and new and to take a fresh approach. Even in forging those friendships or connections or getting videos out or feeling alive again as a singer within the band that I sing with, required me to become innocent and young again and to trust my innate capacity to engage with those things and to be able to build skills in those areas. So, so that feels like the Page of Discs. And helping to nurture other people along who are just starting out on their paths, whether that be astrology or music or meditation. So it's been, it was definitely a year of learning about myself and my capacity, and coming back to what we would call in Shambhala a place of basic goodness and reconnecting with that. And that also goes with the other card, the Believe in Sisterhood card. So, so those two cards, Believe in Sisterhood and the Page of Discs, for 2016, and the Marielle Tarot, I guess I'll count that as the one that I finally crossed off my wish list. Actually, the one that I crossed off my wish list at the very, very end of the year, but it just came at the beginning of this year, is the Buddha Tarot. But since I didn't actually work with that, I bought it in 2016, but I hadn't worked with it yet until this past week, and I am very, very, very new to it, so perhaps I can speak more about that one another time, but we'll go with Marielle for now. All right, thanks guys, and it is, sorry again that I got emotional there. That might be a first on camera. Becoming a baby and trusting that is okay. Anyway, I'm going to stop blathering on into this camera, and just thank you guys, and I hope you have a lovely day, and I'll look forward to seeing your responses or comments, and just staying engaged with this challenge as much as I can, for as long as I can, until I go away next Friday. Okay, bye, and enjoy your weekends.